A lot of people have asked me, why did you create a show? Why are you creating a podcast? So I thought I would share my story with you. Back around 2020, I was struggling within myself. I was wondering, is it more to life than what I was living? I was a wife, I was a mother, grandmother, a sister, and an aunt. But I was yearning. There was something inside of me telling me there was more for me to do. So 2020 started, the pandemic started, and things started shutting down. So when the pandemic hit and things started shutting down, I started working from home. So I had a lot of free time. I'm working at home and, taking care of my mother. And during that time, my mother's health started to decline. So I started focusing more on her and taking care of her. As the months went on, I realized that my mother was dying. So I went into survival mode. I did everything I could to try to make her comfortable, try to let her feel the love of her family before she transitioned over. So on July 25th, 2020, I lost my mother and my best friend. And I think a part of me went with her on that day. It was probably the worst day of my life. And I'll never forget it. Because when my mother passed, a few hours later we got a phone call that my husband's uncle passed. And then the next day my aunt passed. And that same evening, my husband's uncle's brother who passed, his brother passed. So we had 4 deaths in our family over a weekend. It was devastating. And on top of that, I had the pleasure of planning my mother and my aunt's funeral service. And when I think back to those times, I don't know how I did it. I really don't. It was nothing but God guiding me and directing my footsteps, because I clearly stepped out of myself to do what I needed to do to get this thing done. Of course, I had my family helping me in this, but someone had to lead the charge, and that was me. So during all that time, I just relied on God. And then once all this was over, I felt lost. I don't know if any of you lost a parent, but I lost both of my parents. So I felt like I was in this world all by myself. I had nobody else. Yes, I had my husband, I had my kids, my grandkids, my siblings, but there's nothing like your parents' love. And they're both gone. And that hurt me to my core. It hurt me to my core. So I needed someone to talk to. I reached out and saw therapy. In fact, I had 2 therapists. And I talked out my feelings, just trying to get guidance and direction in my life during that time. So the therapist helped, and I was talking it out, trying to figure out, one, if in my marriage, I wasn't happy in my marriage, did I want to continue to stay married? My job, I wasn't happy with my job. A lot of things was going on in my life that I was in conflict with. So I had to make some decisions, some tough decisions. And during that time, and trying to make a decision in my life, my husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I love this man, and I'm going to be with him through this difficult time. So I made the decision to stand by him and be with him as he goes through this horrible time in his life. I know he was scared. I was scared for him. So I wanted to be by his side and help him as he went through his journey with prostate cancer. And we went to the doctor's offices. We went to the treatments, and we did all that. And while we were doing treatments, I'm still deciding, where do I go in my life? Do I stay married? Do I continue living this life when I'm not happy? So while I'm going with him in his treatments, I'm filling out applications for an apartment. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I had to have a plan. So filling out applications for an apartment and standing by my husband, because I do love my husband, and I want the best for him. I want him to be happy, and I want him to be in good health. I don't have no bad feelings towards him, but I wasn't happy. So I was at a crossroads. So I had to make a decision in my life. So I continued to support him. We continued to go through therapy, and finally he rang that bell. Praise God. He's done his treatment, and he was in remission. So thank God for that. And once I found that out and he was out of the woods, I moved out a week later. I moved into my apartment. Here I am sitting in my apartment, sleeping on an air mattress, wondering, what are you doing? Did you make the right decision? I've had so many nights I've cried to God saying, Lord, what do I do? Where do I go? Here I am almost 60 years old, and I walked away from a 25-year marriage and don't have any direction of where I'm going. But this yearning inside of me is pulling and tugging me is more that I need to be doing. So I started thinking about what my mother told me before she died. She said, Kris, God has something more in store for you. There's a plan in your life, and you need to do it. And I promised her that I would pursue that yearning inside of me. I was going to pursue that no matter what. So during my time at my apartment by myself, my phone stopped ringing. No one was knocking on the door. It was just me and God. And I knew I had to find a church home. I knew I had to go towards God, because if I sat here by myself, in this by myself, the thoughts, the things that come to my mind, was I making the right decision? Should I go back to my comfort zone but not happy? So I went to church, and church gave me that sense of love and that support that I desperately needed, and guidance. So God comforted me during my trying times. And then I said, God, what is it that you want me to do? And he brought back to me the podcast. I'm like, a podcast? I know nothing about a podcast. I'm always behind the scenes person. I'm a special events planner. I can plan an event, a party. I can do all that. But I wasn't the person that's talking. I wasn't always the one in the front. I was always behind the scenes. So I started writing out the vision. It started in my mind first. So I started writing out the vision. And I started making preparations towards a podcast. Even though I knew nothing about a podcast, I had to do the research. I bought a computer. My cousin blessed me with a computer and a microphone, but I didn't know what I was doing. I continued to go to church. I continued to lean on God for guidance and direction, and he brought people into my life. He brought people into my life that knew how to do producing, who knew how to do videography, marketing, set design, all that. He brought the people in my life. He makes provision for the vision, and I thank God for that. He can move mountains. There's nothing too hard for God, and I see God moving in my life. So that heavy feeling that I felt a few years ago is gone, because now that I'm walking in my purpose and my calling, that weight is off my shoulders. I feel better about myself. And I decided to do this podcast because I wanted to help women of all ages, a non-judgmental atmosphere, for them to tell their story, to tell what the trials and tribulations that you've been through, or what you're dealing with now, or stuff that you've dealt with and you come out of it, so you can be a testimony to someone else. Revelations 12:11 says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the words of their testimony. And that's exactly what it is. It's women sharing their testimonies to encourage other women. It's powerful. It's impactful. It helps other women. So that's why I created this show. And again, it starts in the mind. The mind is a powerful tool. And that's where everything takes place, is in your mind. And I thank God for a sound mind and the vision for this show. You know, a lot of people want to know, who is Kris Roc? Let me tell you, I'm not the same Kris Roc that I was 3 or 4 years ago. You know, I'll be 60 years old, and I've been through some things. And to the young women, why watch the show? Because I can teach you some things you wish your mother would have taught you. To the mid-aged girl, I can be your auntie. Tell me your story. I can be a listening ear, non-judgmental atmosphere. And everything that I do is rooted in God. God is the baseline for this show. Have no doubt about it. And for the older women, we're not out of the game. We're sexy, we're demanding more, and we want more out of life. Our life is not just being a mother and a wife and a housewife. There's so much more that God has in store for us. So I'm going out on a limb, and I'll be an example to you women to know that you can do it at any age. There's nothing too hard for God, and there's nothing that's impossible for you. So I want to encourage you to watch an episode. Bring your aunt and your auntie by, and your mom and your sister. Let them watch an episode and start to be an encouragement to you, a testimony to you, to see other women going through similar situations that you may have been through. And if you have a story that you want to share with me, you can hit me up at my Let's Talk with Kris Roc at gmail.com. And let's have that conversation. And I thank God for what He's doing in my life and where we're going with this show. And thank you for your support. God bless. And let's keep talking.